"Don't sleep here tonight," the black girl said, her voice barely rising above the low hum of the glass elevators as they slid up the tower of the Harrington Grand Hotel in downtown Chicago. And for a brief second, the entire polished world around her seemed to hesitate, as if even the air had heard something it wasn't supposed to. William Harrington glanced down at her with the calm patience of a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals before breakfast, his tailored navy suit reflecting the soft gold lighting of the elevator like he belonged more to the building than the building itself. The girl standing beside him, Jayla Carter, no older than 8, held onto the strap of her worn backpack with both hands, her eyes steady in a way that didn't match her age, as if she had already seen something she could never unsee. Around them, the elevator was silent except for the faint mechanical whisper of cables pulling thousands of pounds upward, and the glass walls revealed the city falling away beneath them in blurred ribbons of light and motion. William exhaled lightly, offering a polite half-smile that people in his world used when they wanted to dismiss something without making it uncomfortable. "You mean the room?" he asked casually, adjusting his cufflinks. "The penthouse is perfectly fine. Top floor, best view in the city." Jayla didn't look at the view. She looked at the reflection in the glass, watching the lights flicker in her own eyes like she was trying to read something hidden inside them. "It's not about the view," she said softly, each word careful, measured, almost rehearsed, like she had said it to herself too many times before deciding to finally speak it out loud. The elevator dinged as it passed the 60th floor, and a group of hotel staff stepped in, nodding respectfully at William Harrington, recognizing him instantly as one of the building's primary investors. Among them was Marcus Dell, the operations manager, a man with a smooth voice and a practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Evening, Mr. Harrington," Marcus said. "Everything is prepared exactly as requested. The penthouse suite is fully secured and ready for your stay." Jayla shifted slightly at the word secured, her fingers tightening around the edge of her backpack strap, but she said nothing more. William nodded without looking away from his phone, already scanning messages, already mentally somewhere else. "Good," he said. "I'll be working late. No interruptions." Marcus gave a slight nod, but something in his expression flickered for half a second too long when his eyes briefly met Jayla's. The elevator continued upward, each floor passing like a slow heartbeat, until the city outside became nothing more than distant constellations scattered across black glass. Jayla finally spoke again, quieter this time, almost swallowed by the mechanical hum. "I saw them earlier," she said. William lowered his phone slightly. "Saw who?" She hesitated, then pointed subtly upward, not at anything visible, but at the idea of the building itself. "The maintenance crew," she said. "They were in the vents on the 72nd floor. But they weren't checking anything. They were changing things." Marcus let out a soft, polite laugh, the kind used to smooth over conversations that didn't belong in his world. "Sweetheart, it's a hotel. There is always maintenance happening. Nothing unusual." But Jayla didn't respond to him. Her eyes stayed on William. "The air felt different," she added, like it was holding its breath. The elevator slowed again as it approached the upper levels, the lighting shifting slightly warmer, more private, like the building itself was preparing to forget what happened below. William finally turned his full attention to her, not unkindly, but with the faint curiosity of someone humoring a story they assumed had no weight in reality. "Jayla," he said gently, "you're safe here. This hotel is one of the most advanced in the country. There are systems for everything. Air quality, security, structural integrity. Nothing just happens." The doors opened briefly at a private lounge level, and a wave of quiet luxury washed in. Soft jazz music, distant clinking glasses, the scent of polished wood, and expensive cologne. But Jayla didn't move or relax. Instead, she stepped slightly closer to the glass wall, looking down through the tower as if trying to see something hidden inside the building's skeleton. "That's what I thought too," she said, almost to herself. William watched her for a moment longer, then gave a small, reassuring nod, the kind powerful men give when they believe concern can be politely closed. "You'll be fine," he said. "You don't need to worry about anything tonight." But Jayla's voice, when it came again, was even quieter than before and somehow heavier. "That's why I'm telling you now," she said. "Don't sleep here tonight." The elevator reached the top floor with a soft chime, and the door slid open to reveal the vast, silent penthouse corridor beyond, where light shimmered across marble floors like still water, and for a moment no one stepped out, as if the space ahead of them had already begun listening. Inside the penthouse corridor, the silence felt heavier than the city below, as if the higher they climbed, the more the world outside was being sealed away behind layers of glass and steel, and William Harrington stepped forward first, his polished shoes making no sound on the marble floor, followed closely by Jayla Carter and Marcus Dell, who lingered half a step behind with the careful posture of someone who knew every corner of this building but never truly belonged to its highest level. The lights along the corridor were soft, almost too soft, casting long reflections that stretched and shifted as they walked, and Jayla kept her eyes moving slowly from ceiling to floor, noticing details others would ignore, like a faint unevenness in one panel of the ventilation cover or a subtle vibration in the air that made the space feel slightly unsettled. William checked his watch, already mentally dividing his night between work calls and a scheduled briefing, his mind only partially present as he gestured toward the end of the hall where the penthouse suite doors waited like a final checkpoint to his routine. "This way," Marcus said smoothly, stepping ahead to unlock the doors with a card key that emitted a soft green blink. "Everything has been double-checked. The system is running at full capacity." Jayla stopped walking before they reached the door. William noticed, after a second, and turned slightly, his tone still patient but firmer now, like a man used to resolving hesitation with logic. "What is it now?" he asked. Jayla looked at the door, then at the ceiling above it, then back at Marcus. "The air feels wrong here too," she said. Marcus gave a small chuckle, shaking his head slightly as if trying to dismiss the thought without making it uncomfortable. "Hotels this size always have airflow adjustments at night," he said. "You get used to it if you travel often." But Jayla did not move. Instead, she took one step closer to the wall and placed her palm lightly against it, as if listening through the building itself. "It is not just airflow," she said. William sighed quietly, the kind of controlled patience he used in board meetings when conversations drifted away from measurable facts. "Jayla," he said, lowering his voice slightly, "you are safe. I promise you, nothing in this building is going to harm anyone inside it. There are systems in place for every possible issue." Marcus nodded in agreement, inserting just enough reassurance into his expression to make it look natural. "She probably just needs some rest," Marcus added. "It has been a long day for her." Jayla finally turned her head toward Marcus, and for a brief moment her calm expression sharpened into something more focused, not fear, but certainty. "I saw you earlier," she said. Marcus paused. William looked between them. "Saw him where?" William asked. Jayla did not look away from Marcus as she answered. "On the service floor below the 72nd level," she said. "You were talking to two people near the ventilation access panel. You said the system needed to be tested tonight before morning occupancy." Marcus smiled faintly, but this time it looked more controlled than relaxed. "That is called maintenance scheduling," he said. "Nothing unusual." Jayla shook her head slowly. "It did not look like maintenance," she replied. The corridor lights flickered once, almost imperceptibly, and William noticed it enough to glance upward before dismissing it as a minor fluctuation. He stepped closer to the penthouse door and placed his hand near the scanner. "We are done with this conversation," he said gently. "You are tired, and you are imagining patterns where there are none." Jayla looked at him then, her voice steady but quieter than before. "I am not imagining it," she said. "I was in the mechanical stairwell earlier when I got separated from the group tour. I heard the vents before I saw them. Metal does not sound like that when it is normal." Marcus shifted slightly, adjusting his suit jacket. "You were not supposed to be in restricted areas," he said, a hint of discomfort slipping into his tone. William raised a hand slightly, signaling for calm. "She is a guest," he said. "We are not here to argue about access points." But Jayla continued, as if she had decided the only way forward was to be understood completely. "There was a smell near the upper ducts," she said. "Not strong, but like something had been closed for a long time and opened too fast. And I saw markings on the panel bolts that were not part of the building's standard design." William hesitated for the first time, his attention shifting from dismissal to evaluation, the way he would respond when numbers on a report did not match expectations. "Markings," he repeated. Jayla nodded. "Like they were replaced recently," she said. Marcus stepped forward slightly, his tone tightening just enough to be noticeable. This is becoming inappropriate, he said. We are speaking about high-security infrastructure, not playground observations. Jayla did not react to the correction. She simply kept her eyes on William. I am telling you because I do not think it is random, she said. The corridor behind them remained still, but somewhere faint and distant, a soft mechanical hum shifted in pitch for less than a second, like a machine adjusting its breath. William lowered his hand from the scanner without opening the door yet, his expression changing into something more thoughtful, less dismissive. Marcus, he said, when was the last full inspection of the 72nd floor ventilation system? Marcus replied quickly, almost too quickly. 2 days ago, he said. Everything was cleared, fully compliant. William nodded slowly, but his eyes drifted back to Jayla. And you were certain of what you saw? He asked. Jayla nodded once. I am certain enough to tell you not to sleep here tonight, she said again. And this time there was no hesitation in her voice, only quiet insistence. As the lights above them dimmed for a fraction of a second longer than before, leaving the corridor suspended in a silence that felt slightly too precise to be accidental. The silence outside the penthouse door felt heavier now, not because anything had changed visibly, but because something in the rhythm of the building itself seemed slightly misaligned, as if the tower had begun to breathe in a pattern that no one had officially approved, and William Harrington finally lowered his hand from the biometric scanner without entering. His attention no longer divided but fully anchored in the words Jayla Carter had repeated twice already. Marcus Dell stood slightly behind him, posture still controlled, yet his eyes now shifted more frequently toward the corridor corners, where security cameras sat like quiet observers with red indicator lights blinking at steady intervals. Jayla remained still, her small frame framed by the soft golden lighting, but her gaze kept moving, not restless but deliberate, as if she were tracking invisible changes only she could perceive. William exhaled slowly, then spoke in a calm, measured tone that he typically used when turning uncertainty into process. I want a full status report on upper floor ventilation and maintenance activity logs, he said, pressing a discreet communication button on his wrist device that connected directly to the hotel operations system. A brief pause followed. Then a voice responded confirming that all systems were reporting nominal status, with no active maintenance scheduled for the 72nd floor or above for the evening. Marcus immediately added, as expected, everything is fully within operational standards. But Jayla shook her head slightly before William could respond. That is not what I saw, she said. William turned toward her again, studying her more carefully now, not as a child making observations, but as someone whose perception might be grounded in something he had not yet accounted for. Tell me exactly what you saw, he said. Jayla stepped closer to the wall panel near the door and pointed to a thin seam where two metal surfaces met. The paneling there was removed and replaced recently, she said. The screws were not uniform. Some were polished, some were not. That means they were not installed at the same time. Marcus gave a small, controlled smile. Different batches of maintenance parts can happen in large buildings, he said. It does not indicate anything unusual. Jayla did not look at him. It was not only that, she continued. I saw a maintenance card on the 71st floor that did not have proper labeling. The tag numbers were partially covered, like someone tried to hide the identification. William frowned slightly, then raised his wrist device again, this time requesting internal security footage from the lower upper floor corridor system. The response came within seconds, but there was a brief delay in loading the requested segment. That delay was small, almost negligible, but noticeable enough for William to glance at the screen twice. Marcus cleared his throat softly. System buffering happens during high data throughput at night, he said. Nothing to be concerned about. But when the footage finally appeared, it showed a corridor that appeared normal at first glance. Yet Jayla leaned forward slightly. Stop it there, she said suddenly. William paused the playback. Jayla pointed. Look at the ceiling corner near the vent cover. William zoomed in. At first, it looked like a standard ventilation unit, but upon closer inspection, there was a faint inconsistency in the alignment of the cover edges, as if it had been reattached after removal. Marcus stepped closer now, his voice slightly more firm. That is within tolerance variance for industrial installation, he said. Jayla responded immediately. It is not just alignment. The airflow pattern is different. I felt it when I walked through that hallway. The temperature changes too quickly from one section to another. William looked between the screen and Jayla, his expression shifting from patience to analytical concern. He had built his entire career on recognizing patterns and systems that others dismissed, and something about what she was describing did not feel like imagination. He pressed another command into his device, requesting thermal distribution logs for the same corridor. The system responded again with confirmation, but this time a secondary message briefly flashed indicating a scheduled recalibration cycle had been executed earlier than originally documented. Marcus noticed the hesitation in William's expression. Preventive recalibration is often adjusted dynamically, he said quickly. It improves efficiency. But Jayla stepped forward again, her voice steady but softer now. That is not preventive, she said. That is preparation. The word lingered in the air longer than expected. William looked down at her, and for the first time he did not immediately respond. Instead, he turned toward the door, then back to the corridor, as if trying to reconcile what he knew about the building with what he was now being shown through fragmented observations. A faint hum passed through the walls, subtle but distinct enough that all three of them briefly went silent. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough for Jayla to close her eyes, as if confirming something internally. It is starting to change now, she said quietly. William lowered his voice. Change how? He asked. Jayla opened her eyes and looked directly at him. The building is not acting like itself anymore, she said. Marcus immediately responded. That is not a measurable condition. But William did not look at Marcus. Instead, he stared at the corridor ceiling for several seconds, then slowly returned his attention to Jayla. Show me everything you noticed from the beginning, he said. And as he said it, somewhere deeper within the tower structure, a soft mechanical shift echoed through the ventilation system, like a lock being engaged one section at a time, quietly, precisely, and without announcement. William Harrington stood still in the center of the penthouse corridor as the faint mechanical hum inside the walls grew more structured, no longer random, but layered like something following a sequence, and for the first time he stopped treating Jayla Carter's observations as fragmented impressions and began treating them as a connected system that he could not yet see fully. He turned slightly away from the sealed penthouse door and brought up a full architectural schematic on his wrist device, his eyes narrowing as he filtered through ventilation routes, service tunnels, and emergency airflow channels that ran through the upper floors of the Harrington Grand Hotel. Marcus Dell shifted uncomfortably beside him, adjusting his suit cuff with a controlled motion that suggested both familiarity and unease, as if he understood the building too well to be surprised but too involved to be detached. Jayla stood a few feet away, watching the schematic projection reflect faintly in William's eyes, her expression calm but intent, as if she were waiting not for permission to speak, but for someone to finally finish listening. William spoke first without looking away from the data. There is a scheduled airflow recalibration for this building, he said slowly, but it is not supposed to begin until after midnight. Marcus responded immediately, his tone steady but slightly sharpened. That schedule can shift based on occupancy load and environmental balancing protocols, he said. It is standard for high-capacity towers of this size. Jayla stepped forward one small pace. It started already, she said. William paused. What do you mean started? He asked. Jayla raised her hand slightly, pointing toward the ceiling again. The pattern is already repeating, she said. It is not random noise anymore. It is cycling. William frowned and expanded the internal diagnostic feed, pulling live environmental telemetry from multiple floors. Temperature readings, air pressure differentials, and airflow velocity graphs appeared in layered streams of data across his interface. At first glance, everything appeared stable, but then he noticed a subtle deviation curve in the uppermost zone, a fluctuation that repeated at fixed intervals rather than smoothing out naturally. Marcus leaned closer, his voice lowering slightly. That is within acceptable variance thresholds, he said. William did not respond immediately. Instead, he isolated the 72nd through 75th floor systems and ran a comparison against baseline calibration logs. The difference was small, almost negligible in isolation, but consistent across multiple subsystems. Jayla spoke again quietly, her voice steady. That is what I told you, she said. Something was changed on purpose. Marcus exhaled through his nose, a sound that carried the weight of controlled frustration rather than dismissal. A child observing mechanical fluctuation does not equal intent, he said. We are interpreting normal system optimization as something it is not. William finally turned toward Marcus. Then explain this, he said, rotating the device so Marcus could see the layered discrepancy in airflow timing cycles. Marcus looked at it for a moment longer than necessary, then responded carefully. It could be a synchronization drift between upper shaft regulators, he said. It would self-correct within minutes. Jayla shook her head slightly. It does not self-correct, she said. It repeats. The corridor lights flickered again, this time more subtly, and the hum behind the walls deepened into a structured rhythm that felt closer to a pulse than a machine error. William lowered his device slightly and looked toward the sealed penthouse door again. Marcus, he said calmly, who has direct access to recalibration authorization at this level? Marcus hesitated for half a second too long before answering. Only senior operations management and external maintenance contractors approved by corporate oversight, he said. William nodded slowly, but his gaze remained fixed on the door. And were any external contractors approved tonight? Marcus responded quickly. No external contractors are scheduled for this floor. Jayla stepped closer again, her voice soft but precise. Then someone used internal access, she said. Marcus turned slightly toward her now, his tone tightening just enough to reveal pressure beneath control. That is an assumption, he said. Jayla did not look away. It is what I saw, she replied. William raised a hand slightly, signaling for silence before the exchange escalated further. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, then reopened them with a different focus, as if shifting from guest to investigator. Pull access logs for the last 6 hours, he said into his device. A moment passed before the system responded. The log stream appeared, listing authorized entries, timestamps, and access point identifiers. William scanned it quickly, then stopped. One entry had been masked under administrative override authorization, marked with a temporary clearance code he did not recognize. Marcus saw the change in William's expression and immediately stepped in. Corporate emergency protocols sometimes generate temporary overrides during system optimization windows, he said. William turned the screen slightly. This override was issued 20 minutes ago, he said. During the same time the airflow cycle began shifting. The corridor fell into a deeper silence, broken only by the faint structured hum behind the walls. Jayla looked up at the ceiling again. That is when I first felt it change, she said quietly. Marcus spoke again, but his voice now carried a sharper edge. You are allowing coincidental timing to influence interpretation, he said. William finally lowered the device completely and looked at both of them in turn. Or, he said slowly, we are missing a coordinated action inside a system we assumed was static. For the first time, Marcus did not respond immediately. The silence that followed stretched long enough that even the building's ambient hum seemed to adjust its rhythm in response. Jayla took a small breath and spoke again, softer than before. I think it is already moving through the upper floors, she said. William looked at her, then toward the sealed door of the penthouse suite, then back at the corridor stretching behind them. And in that moment, the building no longer felt like a passive structure, but something reorganizing itself in real time, layer by layer, quietly and precisely, without announcing what it was preparing to become. The penthouse corridor had shifted into a deeper stillness, not silence, but a kind of suspended waiting, as if the building itself was holding its breath while unseen systems continued to adjust. Behind its walls, and William Harrington stood motionless for a moment longer, absorbing the layered data streams still glowing on his wrist device before slowly lowering his hand, as though acknowledging that information alone was no longer enough to explain what was unfolding. Marcus Dell remained slightly behind him, his posture still composed, but the subtle tension in his jaw had become more visible now, like someone maintaining control over a situation that no longer followed expected boundaries. Jayla Carter stood near the center of the corridor, small in frame but steady in presence, her eyes moving between the ceiling, the sealed penthouse door, and the faint reflection of shifting lights across the marble floor. William finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. We are going to move, he said. Marcus looked up immediately. Move where? He asked. William gestured toward the far end of the corridor, away from the penthouse entrance. Away from this floor until we confirm what is happening in the system, he said. Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. That is not necessary, he said quickly. There is no verified threat indicator in any of the security protocols. Jayla took a small step forward. The system does not show threat indicators because it is not designed to recognize what is being changed inside itself, she said. William looked at her again, studying her face with increasing focus. Explain that, he said. Jayla turned slightly, as if visualizing the building in her mind. When I was on the 71st floor earlier, she said, I saw maintenance access being used in sections that were supposed to be inactive. Not just one panel, but multiple points along the same airflow path. That means someone is not fixing something. They are guiding something. Marcus responded immediately. That is a very strong interpretation based on limited observation. Jayla did not react to his tone. It is not interpretation, she said. It is pattern recognition. William exhaled slowly and checked the building's status feed again. The airflow cycle was still stable on paper, but the timing gaps between calibration pulses had shortened by measurable increments. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to indicate acceleration. He looked toward the penthouse door again. If someone is actively adjusting upper system cycles, he said slowly, then the question becomes why they would do it while the building is fully occupied. Marcus stepped closer now, lowering his voice slightly. There are many reasons for system adjustments in luxury infrastructure, he said. Energy optimization, thermal balancing, even scheduled testing of emergency responses. Jayla shook her head slightly. This is not testing, she said. Testing repeats the same condition. This is changing each cycle slightly every time it runs. A faint vibration passed through the corridor floor, subtle enough that it could have been mistaken for structural settling, but William noticed it immediately. He looked down, then toward the walls, then back at the ceiling vents that lined the upper corners of the hallway. Did you feel that? He asked. Marcus paused before answering. Old buildings of this scale shift under load changes, he said. Temperature differences across levels can cause minor expansion feedback. But Jayla had already turned her attention upward again. It is moving faster now, she said quietly. William did not respond immediately. Instead, he activated a deeper diagnostic layer, bypassing standard reporting channels and accessing raw system telemetry directly from the building's central control interface. What appeared on the display made him pause longer than before. Multiple airflow nodes across upper floors were now synchronizing in staggered intervals, not simultaneously, but in a sequence that resembled directional flow rather than random recalibration. Marcus noticed William's silence and spoke again, his tone more controlled than before. What are you seeing? He asked. William did not answer immediately. He enlarged the airflow map, tracing the sequence of changes from lower service corridors up through the 72nd and 73rd floors. Then he saw it. The pattern was not just vertical adjustment. It was directional progression through connected zones, as if the system was being guided along a predefined path rather than reacting independently. Jayla stepped closer without being asked. That is what I mean, she said softly. It is not random anymore. It is following the building like a path. Marcus's expression tightened slightly. That is not possible without full system override authorization, he said. William turned toward him fully now. Then show me who has that authorization, he said. Marcus hesitated again, just long enough for the silence to feel significant. Corporate security logs would need executive clearance, he replied. William looked back at the data stream. I have executive clearance, he said. The corridor behind them remained unchanged visually, but the ambient sound had shifted again, now carrying a faint layered rhythm that seemed to rise and fall in intervals too precise to be natural. Jayla closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. It is closer now, she said. William looked at her. Closer to what? He asked. Jayla hesitated for the first time. To the penthouse level, she said. Marcus immediately stepped forward, his voice sharper now. This is turning into speculation based on fear responses, he said. William raised his hand slightly, stopping him. No, William said slowly. This is turning into confirmation that something in this building is actively changing its operational behavior in real time. He turned toward the sealed penthouse door again, then toward the corridor behind them, as if calculating distance, access points, and possible intervention routes. The system hum inside the walls shifted once more, deeper this time. and for the first time all three of them fell completely silent, not because there was nothing to say, but because the building itself had begun to feel less like a structure and more like a sequence that was still unfolding without their permission. The silence in the corridor had deepened into something almost physical, as if the air itself had become denser with each passing second, and William Harrington stood still with his attention locked on the evolving system feed, while Marcus Dell remained slightly angled toward the penthouse door, and Jayla Carter watched both men carefully as though she understood that the decision forming in the next few moments would determine more than just where they stood physically inside the Harrington Grand Hotel. William finally lowered his wrist device completely, no longer treating the data as abstract patterns, but as an active process he needed to respond to. "We are not staying here," he said calmly. Marcus immediately responded, "Mr. Harrington, there is still no verified threat condition. Leaving the penthouse would be an unnecessary escalation." William turned toward him slowly. "Then explain why the system behaves like it is moving toward a defined endpoint," he said. Marcus hesitated, then replied, "System behaviors can converge during recalibration cycles. That does not imply intent." Jayla stepped forward slightly, her voice steady but quiet. "It is not just converging," she said. "It is arriving." William looked at her for a moment longer than before, then turned toward the corridor again. The faint hum behind the walls had shifted once more, now layered in intervals that felt increasingly structured, like a sequence repeating with minor variation. He made a decision. "We go to the service stairwell," he said. Marcus frowned. "That route is not necessary for safety," he said quickly. "The elevators are fully operational." William shook his head. "I am not using systems that are part of whatever is currently being adjusted," he replied. Jayla did not speak, but she moved first, turning toward the direction of the stairwell access point she had noticed earlier during their walk along the upper corridor. William followed her immediately, and after a brief hesitation, Marcus fell in behind them, though his posture had changed slightly, less confident and more observant. As they walked, the lighting in the corridor flickered once again, not fully dimming, but shifting in intensity as if responding to something passing through the building's electrical rhythm. Jayla slowed briefly and placed her hand near the wall again, then continued forward. "It is faster now," she said. William glanced at her. "Faster how?" he asked. Jayla replied without looking back. "The sequence between floors is shortening. Whatever is changing the system is reducing delay between sections." Marcus interjected, "That is not how scheduled maintenance works." Jayla responded calmly, "Then this is not scheduled maintenance." They reached the service stairwell entrance, a reinforced metal door with biometric access control and emergency override panel. William placed his hand on the scanner, and the system hesitated for a fraction of a second before granting access. The door unlocked with a soft mechanical release. As it opened, a cooler current of air moved through the gap, noticeably different from the conditioned airflow of the upper corridor. William paused for a moment at the threshold, then stepped inside. The stairwell was dimly lit, illuminated by emergency lighting strips that cast steady white intervals along the concrete walls. The sound here was different, less polished, more exposed, as if the building's internal structure was more honest in these spaces. Marcus followed, glancing upward and downward along the stairwell shaft before speaking. "If we are moving away from the penthouse, we are removing ourselves from primary environmental systems monitoring," he said. "That limits our visibility." William replied, "Or it removes us from whatever is actively being controlled up there." Jayla stood near the railing, looking down into the vertical shaft where the stairwell descended into darker levels. "It is still moving upward," she said. William turned slightly. "What is?" he asked. Jayla answered, "The pattern. It started below, but now it is reaching higher floors in sequence, like it is learning the structure as it moves." Marcus gave a small, controlled shake of his head. "That is a subjective interpretation," he said. William looked at him directly. "Then provide me with an alternative explanation that accounts for the synchronized airflow shifts, the unauthorized access log, and the structural timing changes," he said. Marcus did not respond immediately. The silence in the stairwell felt heavier than the corridor had, amplified by the enclosed concrete space and the faint echo of distant mechanical movement within the building core. Jayla spoke again softly. "It is. Almost at this level," she said. William looked at her. "How do you know?" he asked. Jayla hesitated briefly, then answered, "Because the air just changed again." William paused and focused his attention. At first there was nothing obvious, but after a few seconds he noticed it. The airflow in the stairwell had shifted slightly, no longer moving consistently upward or downward, but pulsing in a measured rhythm that aligned with the same timing pattern they had observed in the upper corridor. Marcus stepped closer to the stairwell wall panel, examining it quickly. "This is internal ventilation modulation," he said. "It is being routed through multiple zones to balance pressure variance." William looked at the panel, then at the stairwell shaft, then upward. "Or," he said slowly, "it is following us." Jayla remained still, her eyes fixed upward into the stairwell darkness. "It is not following us," she said quietly. "It is following the building." The lights above them flickered once more, not fully dimming but shifting in a synchronized pulse that matched the airflow rhythm. And for the first time, William Harrington felt the structure around him not as a place of control or luxury, but as something actively organizing its own movement through space without regard for the people standing inside it. The stairwell had become quieter than the upper corridors, but it was not a comfortable quietness. It was the kind of silence that felt engineered, as if even the sound had been redistributed through the building's internal structure, and William Harrington paused mid-step on the steel landing, his hand resting lightly on the railing as he processed the continuous data stream still updating on his wrist device, despite the fact that they were now moving through a non-public service core of the Harrington Grand Hotel. Marcus Dell stood 2 steps above him, scanning the stairwell walls with increasing attention, his earlier confidence replaced by a more restrained focus, while Jayla Carter remained at the lower landing, looking upward into the vertical shaft where emergency lights pulsed at steady intervals that now seemed to align with the same rhythmic cycle they had observed in the upper floors. William spoke without turning fully. "The airflow pattern is consistent through this structure," he said slowly, "but it is no longer behaving like independent systems. It is behaving like a single coordinated network." Marcus responded immediately, "That is how centralized environmental control systems are designed at this scale." William shook his head slightly. "Not with this level of synchronization between floors that should be operating independently," he said. Jayla stepped up 1 level, her voice quiet but steady. "It is learning the building faster than we are mapping it," she said. Marcus frowned. "That is not a technical possibility," he replied. Jayla did not argue. Instead, she placed her hand lightly on the stairwell wall, as if feeling vibration through the concrete. "It is already inside every level it passed," she said. William looked at her, then followed her gaze upward into the stairwell shaft. The air movement had changed again, subtle but measurable in the way it brushed against their clothing, no longer random drafts, but directional pulses that matched the timing patterns they had seen earlier. William checked the system logs again. The recalibration markers were now appearing in ascending sequence across multiple floors, each update occurring slightly faster than the last. He stopped walking for a moment. "Marcus," he said, "run a full access audit on manual override entries across all service zones for the last hour." Marcus hesitated briefly, then activated his own device. A few seconds passed before he responded, his tone more controlled than before. "There are multiple overlapping authorization signatures," he said, "but they are not originating from a single access point." William turned slightly. "Explain that," he said. Marcus studied the data longer. "It appears distributed," he said, "like several entry points are being coordinated simultaneously." Jayla spoke softly from the lower step. "That is why it feels like it is everywhere," she said. William looked down at her. "Everywhere," he repeated. Jayla nodded. "Not one place. All connected places." The stairwell lighting above them flickered in a synchronized wave, moving downward through the visible shaft like a slow pulse traveling through the building's spine. William felt the shift before he saw it in the data, a subtle change in pressure that no longer matched normal ventilation logic. He looked upward again, his expression now fully focused. "This is not just airflow recalibration," he said. "This is structural system behavior being actively rewritten in real time." Marcus immediately responded. "That would require full administrative override at the architectural control layer." William nodded slowly. "Then someone has it," he said. A brief silence followed, heavier than before, broken only by the faint mechanical rhythm echoing through the stairwell core. Jayla took 1 more step upward, then stopped. "It is close now," she said quietly. William turned toward her. How close? He asked. Jayla looked upward into the dim shaft. It is passing this level right now, she said. At that exact moment, the airflow shifted again, not in volume, but in direction, reversing slightly before stabilizing into a new pattern that matched the same sequence they had seen on higher floors earlier. Marcus stepped closer to the railing, looking down the stairwell as if expecting movement that could not be seen directly. This is impossible without central command authorization from within the penthouse control suite, he said. William's eyes narrowed slightly. We are not in the penthouse suite, he said. Marcus looked at him. Exactly, he replied. William stood still for a moment longer, then slowly raised his wrist device again, not to check data this time, but to attempt direct communication with the building's core operations hub. The connection attempt paused longer than usual before returning a single status line indicating restricted override in progress. William lowered his hand. It is already inside the control layer, he said quietly. Jayla looked at him. That is why I told you not to sleep here tonight, she said. And as she finished speaking, the stairwell lights above them dimmed in sequence, not failing, but transitioning, as if the building had entered a new operational state that none of them had. Authorized or fully understood. The stairwell had fully transitioned into a state of structured uncertainty, where nothing appeared visually broken, yet everything behaved as if it were being guided by an unseen logic that no longer matched the building's original design. And William Harrington stood motionless on the steel landing for several seconds, while his wrist device continued to stream restricted system alerts that now appeared in cascading sequences across multiple operational layers. Marcus Dell remained a few steps above, scanning both the stairwell shaft and his device simultaneously, his expression now fully serious, no longer attempting to normalize what he was observing, while Jayla Carter stood lower on the steps, her gaze fixed upward as if she could see the movement of the building not as data, but as a living pattern unfolding in real time. William finally broke the silence. We are no longer looking at a maintenance system, he said quietly. Marcus responded without hesitation. Then what are we looking at? William paused, then replied, a coordinated override that is not following standard control hierarchy. Marcus frowned slightly. That still requires an originating command source, he said. William nodded. Exactly, he replied. Jayla stepped up one more level, her voice calm but firm. It does not have one source, she said. William turned toward her. Explain, he said. Jayla pointed upward into the stairwell shaft. It started in pieces, she said. But now it is connected. Each floor is not being controlled separately anymore. They are responding to each other. Marcus immediately responded. That implies distributed synchronization, which is not possible without central coordination. Jayla shook her head. It is not coordination, she said. It is adaptation. William looked between them, then slowly raised his wrist device again, this time initiating a full structural intelligence audit, bypassing standard hotel operational filters and accessing the deep integration layer that connected all environmental systems across the tower. The response took longer than before. When the data finally appeared, it did not present a single failure point or external intrusion marker. Instead, it showed cascading adjustments across airflow, pressure balancing, and temperature regulation nodes that were occurring in sequence rather than in parallel, as if each floor was reacting to the last instead of responding to a central command. William narrowed his eyes. This is not external control injection, he said slowly. Marcus stepped closer, looking at the data. Then it is internal feedback loop instability, he said quickly. William shook his head. It is too structured for instability, he replied. The stairwell lights above them dimmed again, not fully, but in a controlled wave that traveled downward through the visible shaft in a pattern that mirrored the same timing intervals now visible in the system logs. Jayla closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. It is learning the building's timing, she said quietly. William looked at her. Learning, he repeated. Jayla nodded. Every adjustment teaches it how the building reacts, she said. Marcus frowned deeply. That is not how mechanical systems function, he said. Jayla responded immediately. Then it is not functioning mechanically anymore. A long silence followed. William lowered his device slightly and looked upward into the stairwell darkness, where the emergency lighting receded into deeper levels of shadow. For the first time, He was no longer interpreting data as isolated anomalies, but as a continuous progression of changes forming a directional path through the structure. He spoke slowly. If this system is adapting based on response feedback, he said, then it will continue adjusting until it reaches a stable endpoint. Marcus replied, and that endpoint would be system normalization. William shook his head. Or full structural takeover of environmental control layers, he said. The word lingered in the air longer than intended. Jayla stepped closer to the railing again. It is already deciding where it wants to be stable, she said softly. William turned toward her. And where is that? He asked. Jayla looked upward. The top, she said. At that exact moment, a subtle shift passed through the stairwell, not loud, not visible, but unmistakable in its coordination. The airflow reversed direction again, briefly stabilizing into a new pattern that matched a higher floor sequence they had not yet accessed. Marcus stepped back slightly, his composure finally breaking into visible concern. If it reaches the penthouse control layer, he said, it will gain access to all environmental command functions. William did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked upward for several seconds, then down the stairwell shaft, then back at his device. The system logs were now updating in near real time, showing synchronized recalibration across multiple floors converging toward a single directional alignment. Jayla spoke softly, almost as if confirming what she already knew. It is not spreading randomly, she said. It is climbing. William finally lowered his device completely. Then we move faster than it does, he said. And as they began to ascend the stairwell again, the lighting above them shifted once more, not failing, but reconfiguring into a sequence that mirrored their upward movement, as if the building itself had begun to anticipate their every step. The stairwell ascent had become increasingly synchronized with the building itself, as if every step William Harrington, Marcus Dell, and Jayla Carter took upward was being measured, anticipated, and subtly mirrored by the structure around them. And by the time they reached the uppermost service landing just below the penthouse control level, the environmental rhythm had fully stabilized into a precise repeating cycle that no longer felt like background function, but active coordination. William paused at the final landing, his hand resting lightly on the metal railing as his wrist device displayed continuous real-time system convergence indicators, all pointing toward a single operational node located directly above them. Marcus stood slightly behind, breathing controlled but visibly restrained, his earlier confidence now replaced with cautious observation, while Jayla moved ahead just enough to look up at the sealed access door that led directly into the penthouse control suite. The lighting above them shifted again, this time not flickering but transitioning in a smooth wave that matched the airflow pattern they had been tracking from lower levels, confirming that the system was no longer reacting in fragments but operating as a unified progression. William finally spoke in a low, steady voice. Everything is converging at the control layer, he said. Marcus responded carefully. That is expected. The control layer is where all environmental systems synchronize. William shook his head slightly. No, he said. This is not synchronization. This is consolidation. Jayla stepped closer to the control door, placing her hand lightly near the access panel without touching it. It is learning where all the systems meet, she said quietly. Marcus frowned. That is not how programmed infrastructure operates, he said. Jayla turned slightly toward him. Then something is operating it differently, she replied. A brief silence followed, heavier than any they had experienced in the stairwell. William examined the control panel, which now displayed a soft pulsing light pattern that matched the same rhythmic sequence found throughout the building's upper systems. He raised his device again, attempting a direct override access to the penthouse control layer, but the system responded with a restricted boundary notice indicating that internal environmental authority had been temporarily reallocated. Marcus stepped forward quickly. That level of restriction requires executive approval from multiple redundant security nodes, he said. William looked at him. Or it requires someone already inside the system architecture to bypass those nodes, he replied. Marcus hesitated, then spoke more carefully. That is not a realistic scenario, he said. Jayla remained focused on the door. It is already inside, she said. William turned to her. Inside what? He asked. Jayla answered calmly. Inside the timing layer. Every floor it passed adjusted the next one. Now it does not need to force entry. It is being allowed in by sequence. At that moment, the control door emitted a soft mechanical tone, indicating a status change in access permissions, followed by a brief delay, as if the system itself was recalculating. Authorization pathways. William took a step closer, studying the panel. This is not manual override, he said slowly. This is adaptive system negotiation. Marcus immediately responded. That is not possible without human authorization. William did not look away from the panel. Unless the system has begun treating environmental adjustments as authorization inputs, he said. A faint shift moved through the air around them, subtle but noticeable, as the airflow pattern rebalanced once again, now perfectly aligned with the uppermost control zone. Jayla stepped back slightly. It is here now, she said quietly. William turned toward her. Where is here? He asked. Jayla looked up at the sealed door. At the decision point, she said. The control panel light changed color, shifting from steady white to a slow pulsing amber tone, indicating a state transition neither fully locked nor fully open. Marcus stepped back half a step. We need to leave this level and reset the system from an external command station, he said. William finally turned fully toward him. If we leave now, it completes the cycle without observation, he said. Marcus responded. And if we stay, we are inside an unknown system behavior pattern that is actively evolving. Jayla interrupted softly. It is not evolving randomly anymore. It is choosing structure. William looked at her again, then at the control panel, then at the ceiling above where the final airflow nodes converged. Then we stop it here, he said. He raised his wrist device and initiated a full system lockdown attempt targeting the penthouse control layer, but the interface paused mid-sequence as if encountering an internal contradiction. The building's ambient hum shifted one final time, settling into a stable, continuous tone that filled the stairwell and control landing equally. And for a moment, all three of them stood still as the system displayed a single new status line across the panel indicating full environmental integration in progress, with no external override source recognized. And as William read the message, he realized that the building was no longer separating control from structure, but merging both into a single continuous system that had already reached the point of decision without waiting for human approval.